Welcome to the Metaphysical News Show. I'm your host, Rory Colgan. This is produced in conjunction with InnerHealthToday.com, and it is in association with We Are Valuable Media. What I'd like to share with you today is groundbreaking news. Not so much in the sense that nobody's talked about this before, but in the sense that the person that is breaking this scientific paper is actually receiving more credibility from the current power structure. And that's important, even though it's not necessary to have things approved by the government or supported by the government or sponsored by the government in order for it to be true. It's helpful when something is true and is then therefore supported by the power structure that is. So that's what this story is breaking mostly. But for some of you, you may have never even heard of this hypothesis, so that might be new to you as well. But the scientific evidence, as far as I can tell as a lay physicist and as a professional metaphysicist, is quite profound. So the probability is quite high that what the information that this physicist, John Brandenburg, is describing is accurate. So let's delve right into the details. First off, John Brandenburg, he received his Ph.D. in 1981 from some prestigious school in California. I forget the name of it off the top of my head, and it's not in my notes. But he is a plasma physicist, and in his doctoral studies and in his professional career, he has had to become familiar with the workings of nuclear weapons. That's part of how he attained his Ph.D. So he has gone back and examined different bits of information from the Viking satellite of 1976 that went around Mars. And what he discovered was, again, groundbreaking in the sense that it was more scientifically approved than anybody else that had already put forth such a hypothesis. What he discovered is that there was radioactive material, two particular isotopes, that are only found, as far as we know, in nuclear weapon detonations. So this is a radioactive fallout, so to speak, or radioactive material that only occurs in the presence of a detonated nuclear weapon. The two forces are called Xenon-129 isotope, and the other one, something for you Superman fans, is called krypton. So those two particular radioactive materials are found at a density of 2 times higher than that of Earth. Now, why is that important? Well, for one, those materials on Earth weren't observable until after we started detonating nuclear weapons. Now, there were only 2 nuclear weapons, as far as we know, that were detonated over civilian populations. But that doesn't count the dozens and dozens that different countries were testing, whether it was America out in Nevada in the White Sand Deserts, or other countries out in the sea or in Siberia. Wherever people were testing, these radioactive materials entered into the atmosphere. Okay, so we're talking dozens and dozens of bombs, huge bombs, a lot bigger than the ones that were detonated in 1945. And yet in Mars, the radioactive material is found in a quantity 200% to 300% higher than that of Earth. Now, interestingly enough, there are 2 scar sites that this physicist, John Brandenburg, mentions. One is near the face on Mars, Sedona Mensa, and then the other one, which I'm going to butcher its name, is called Galactic Chaos. It's in a utopian area, and I, again, can't actually describe what area of Mars it is, but what I can tell you is that there are 2 particular areas that had these radioactive scars, but not craters. So the bombs, supposedly, were not dropped on the actual Terran surface, but instead exploded in the atmosphere. Now, this atmosphere then was basically blown away. So the water and that which supported life was destroyed pretty much instantaneously. So this is really important because what this shows is that there was an advanced civilization on Mars in a climate similar to Earth's, and then another civilization, or a renegade part of that civilization, we don't know, came and detonated 2 nuclear bombs and basically caused the genocide of the people of Mars and sterilized the planet, removed the traces of water. Now the debris field, even though there's 2 detonation sites, is found throughout the planet. Now again, this is extremely important to understand that there is only one way that we know that these 2 radioactive isotopes can be created, and that is through a nuclear bomb. Now, the size of these nuclear bombs is somewhat staggering. One of them has to be half the size of the Empire State Building. The other one, the full size of the Empire State Building. So that civilization, that group of entities, those intelligences, had enough wherewithal to know that they were going to be destroying the atmosphere of Mars. This is important because what it does is it exposes the medieval, primitive, naive belief that civilization started 6,000 years ago, and it started somehow at the peak and then went slowly down and down and down and degraded all the way until the Renaissance some 4,000, 5,000 years later. That is an inaccurate picture in terms of its completeness. So what this story does is shows that civilization, maybe it was even us, humanity that was on Mars, and some part of humanity destroyed it, and now we're only on 1 planet instead of 2. We don't know the answer to that, and that's not what this particular video is about. What it's about is exploring the truth that there is evidence for advanced civilizations on Mars and the destruction of that civilization with technology we have today. Now, this is where it gets really interesting and important for you and I. What do you know in terms of the past? Well, you know that if you don't learn the lessons from the past, you are doomed to repeat it. We stand on a verge, or close to the verge, of a World War III. Many countries have nuclear weapons. Many countries are tense and uptight, and they're striving for small political and selfish needs. These greedy needs and these ignorant perspectives can lead us down the same path that would scar the planet to the point where we would look like Mars in the future, where we would sterilize the planet. That is incomprehensible to me, and you and I need to wake up and recognize that we have the power to shift that. And how do we do that? How do we take such a macrocosm level of, hey, we're about to be in a World War III, and how do you and I on a daily basis combat that or change the course that we are heading down? And it's very simple. We start by treating every person that we interact with the way we wish countries would interact with each other. In other words, you give love, you give compassion, you give respect. And if you can't even respect or listen to a person, you tolerate them, okay? You don't wish for their death or their annihilation, because wishing for somebody's death or annihilation is only a few steps away from picking up a gun and doing the exact thing that you wish to have done. So we need to root out the ignorance and the violence in our primitive mindsets so that we don't repeat the history of thousands and thousands of years ago of what happened on Mars. Yes, it is fantastic and phenomenal to know that there was an advanced civilization on another planet. That opens our eyes to the whole idea of cosmology in a different perspective. But what's really important, as far as I'm concerned, is that you and I recognize that we do not need to do a nuclear war. We have reached a point in our evolution where we can achieve harmony, or we can achieve cooperation. Forget peace. Peace is so much further down the road. Let's just start with cooperation, harmony, intelligence, and respect and tolerance. Let's start there. So these are the places that you and I can start that will make a huge difference. So this individual, John Brandenburg, is going to be presenting his study, his case study, his evolving research at the 2016 Space Conference here in September of 2016. That's great news because the head of NASA is there, and very important people within the space industry are there, so that they're finally starting to pay attention to this and not demonize it and call it a conspiracy theory or a nutter or a loony. So we're starting to have a shift in perspective. So as that shift in perspective happens, we need to develop the intelligence to recognize that we are older than we think we are, or at least that we can learn from the late ancestors or other civilizations, even if they're not our quote-unquote species. And that's a whole nother topic. It's like, my goodness, why do we fight over the skin color and the race and the religion when there are probably hundreds and hundreds of species way more diverse than us? Why can't we at least recognize that we're all earthlings, or relatively, we've all been living on Earth for a few thousand years, even if we came from different planets. I mean, come on, people, let's wake up. This is nothing more than skin tone. So there are a lot of things to this, but mostly recognize that we have the power to keep nuclear war from happening again. And that is something that the universe is in support of based upon the yugas and where we're moving. We're moving into a more enlightened state. So let's wake up, recognize the truth, and start living with more harmony and cooperation. This is Rory Colgan from the Metaphysical News Show, in cooperation with We Are Valuable Media and in production with InnerHealthToday.com. Talk to you soon.